A merchant ship screams for help across the void. 3 Krex dreadnoughts close in, life support failing. Every major power hears their cry and chooses to look away. But one frontier outpost picks up the signal. Earth's Defiant is the only ship in range. What happens when humanity answers a call the galaxy refused? The Harmony's light drifted in the Kepler 442 system, a crippled vessel with multiple hull breaches and no engine power. Life support systems flickered at 19% capacity. Oxygen levels dropped steadily in all compartments. 200 civilian passengers waited in emergency shelters while the ship's skeleton crew tried to stabilize the main power grid. 3 Krex dreadnoughts maintained formation around the stricken merchant vessel. Their weapon systems glowed with contained energy. One ship fired a precision burst that disabled the Harmony's last functional shield emitter. Another targeted communications arrays with surgical accuracy. The Krex worked methodically, like engineers dismantling machinery rather than warriors engaged in combat. The distress signal cut through the void on multiple frequencies. It contained raw audio of screaming, emergency alarms, and the captain's repeated plea for immediate assistance. Transmission markers identified it as a civilian vessel under attack by unidentified warships. The signal reached 17 major systems within the first minute of broadcasting. Command centers across the galactic core received the transmission simultaneously. On the Xylos Prime Naval Station, tactical officers immediately identified the Krex signatures. They ran engagement simulations that showed a 68% casualty rate for any rescue fleet. The projection included likely Krex retaliation against nearby trade routes. Fleet Admiral Vorlak of the Galactic Federation reviewed the casualty estimates. He considered the political implications of engaging the Krex without council approval. His aide presented a cost analysis showing the fuel expenditure alone would exceed the Harmony's light's total value. Other admirals cited similar concerns across 6 different command centers. Political leaders received briefings that emphasized diplomatic repercussions. The Krex Collective had not signed any interstellar conflict treaties. Engaging them could trigger border conflicts across 3 sectors. One ambassador noted the merchant vessel flew under a neutral flag with no strategic alliances. The consensus formed quickly among the great powers. Admiral Vorlak finally stated the position they all shared. One merchant ship does not justify risking multiple warships and possible galactic conflict. His counterparts in other governments reached identical conclusions through separate calculations. 12 major powers acknowledged receipt of the distress signal. None dispatched assistance. The silence stretched across light years. On the Harmony's light, crew members watched their communication panel with fading hope. No response indicators lit up on the long-range receiver. The Krex continued their systematic dismantling of the ship's external systems. Their weapons now targeted propulsion units. This collective inaction represented more than military caution. It revealed a fundamental calculation about the value of life within mainstream galactic civilization. Civilian vessels existed within cost-benefit analyses. Rescue missions required acceptable risk thresholds. The great powers had determined these 200 lives fell below that threshold. The vacuum created by their refusal to act began to pull at the edges of civilized space. Moral calculations had been made and logged. Strategic decisions had been recorded. But nature abhors a vacuum, whether atmospheric or ethical. Something would fill this void. The question was what or who would answer when every civilized power had chosen silence. The distress signal arrived at Aurora Base with a faint crackle of static. Located at the very edge of charted space, the small Earth outpost served primarily as a listening post and refueling station. Its primary sensor arrays were designed to monitor background radiation and stellar anomalies, not handle panicked civilian maydays. The signal cut through the usual quiet hum of deep space communications with jarring urgency. Lieutenant Jake Morrison monitored the incoming transmission from his station in the control room. His face tightened as the audio stream resolved into coherent language. He heard the fear in the merchant captain's voice, the shrill background alarms, the sound of structural stress. His hands moved automatically to enhance the signal and triangulate its origin. The readout placed the Harmony's light in the Kepler 442 system, just beyond standard patrol routes. Commander Lisa Parker approached his station, drawn by the unusual traffic. She watched the tactical overlay populate with data. 3 Krex dreadnought signatures appeared on screen, surrounding the distressed vessel. Her expression didn't change, but her posture shifted slightly. She recognized the configuration from intelligence briefings. These were frontline warships, not patrol vessels. She accessed the galactic response log through secure channels. The log showed 12 major powers had received and acknowledged the distress call. None had dispatched assistance. 3 had formally declined to intervene, citing jurisdictional concerns. The others remained silent. Parker scanned the tactical assessment of Krek's capabilities against their own resources. Earth's lone ship, Defiant, rested in its docking cradle 2 levels below them. The ship carried a crew of 300, most of whom were currently off duty. The Defiant was equipped with standard defensive systems and moderate firepower, designed for border patrol and diplomatic escort missions. It was not built to engage capital warships. Parker calculated the numbers silently. 300 crew members against 200 civilians. 3 Krek's dreadnoughts against 1 Earth vessel. The mathematics were brutally clear. Any military analysis would classify this as an unacceptable risk scenario. Standard protocols dictated non-engagement without overwhelming force or clear strategic advantage. She looked at the real-time feed from the merchant ship. Life support indicators flashed critical warnings. Parker considered the cold logic that had guided every other command center in the galaxy. She understood their calculations perfectly. This was how civilized societies managed risk and resources. Then she made a different calculation. This wasn't about military advantage or political consequences. This was about 200 people who would die without help. The silence from every other power had created a void that demanded filling. Someone had to answer. Her voice remained completely steady when she spoke. She ordered Lieutenant Morrison to open a priority channel to Captain Bennett's personal comm. She didn't consult with Earth Command or request additional authorization. The regulations allowed for discretionary action in extreme circumstances. Aurora Base became the only command post to break the galactic silence. Their response signal traveled back along the same path the distress call had come. It contained no negotiations, no conditions, and no request for clarification. It was simply an acknowledgement that help was coming. Captain Roy Bennett received the transmission on his personal communicator while reviewing maintenance logs in his quarters. The device vibrated with the specific pattern that indicated priority traffic from Aurora Base. He recognized Commander Parker's voice immediately, though the message lasted only 12 seconds. She provided coordinates, enemy composition, and civilian status without embellishment. Bennett absorbed the information without changing expression. He understood the mission parameters within moments. 3 Krek's dreadnoughts against 1 Earth vessel. The tactical disparity was absolute. Standard engagement protocols would classify this as a non-viable scenario. Military doctrine dictated retreat and regroup under such conditions. Every other galactic power had already reached that logical conclusion. Bennett placed his communicator on the desk and stood up slowly. The captain walked to the ship-wide intercom and pressed the assembly alert. The tone echoed through all compartments of the Defiant. Crew members straightened at their stations or emerged from recreation areas. They moved toward the main hangar bay without questioning the order. Bennett took the fastest route through the ship's central corridor. His footsteps echoed on the metal grating. 300 crew members gathered in the hangar beneath the silent forms of shuttlecraft. They stood at relaxed attention, waiting for their captain. Bennett climbed onto a maintenance platform to address them. He did not use the public address system. His voice carried across the open space without amplification. He described the situation in precise terms. A civilian merchant vessel with 200 souls aboard. 3 Krek's warships systematically dismantling its defenses. Life support failing. No other ships responding. He explained the Krek's weapon capabilities against their own defenses. He did not use metaphors or soften the reality. The numbers spoke for themselves. Every person in the hangar understood the probable outcome. They had trained for combat scenarios and studied Krek's tactics. They knew what capital-class dreadnoughts could do to a ship of their size. Some exchanged glances. Others simply watched their captain with calm expressions. No one looked away from Bennett's steady gaze. The captain then made his offer. Any crew member who wished to transfer to Aurora Base could do so immediately. No questions would be asked. No records would be kept. He would consider it a personal favor if they helped with emergency evacuation procedures before departing. He waited silently after speaking. The hangar bay remained completely still. Not a single person moved toward the airlocks. Not one crew member broke formation. The silence stretched for 10 full seconds. Then a weapons technician spoke from the third row. She said they were all still waiting for orders. Another voice from engineering said they had power to transfer whenever the captain gave the word. The responses came from different sections of the crowd without coordination. Bennett looked across the faces of his crew. He saw determination where he might have expected fear. He saw resolution instead of hesitation. His final words to them were simple and direct. "We are the only ones who can help. We are the only ones who will help." The phrases hung in the air between them. The crew returned to their stations without further discussion. Bennett walked to the bridge and took his command chair. He ordered the helm to undock from Aurora Base and set course for the Kepler 442 system. Navigation plotted the fastest possible route. Engineering reported all systems at full readiness. The Defiant turned away from the safety of the outpost and oriented itself toward deep space. The ship accelerated into the void, heading directly toward certain confrontation. The Defiant dropped out of warp space precisely within weapons range of the Krex formation. The transition from faster-than-light travel to normal space created a brief sensor distortion around the ship. For 3 seconds, the vessel hung motionless against the starfield. Then the tactical systems finished reinitializing and began feeding data to the bridge. Sensor readings confirmed 3 capital-class dreadnoughts in triangular formation around the Harmony's light. Each warship massed approximately 20 times more than the Defiant. Their energy signatures indicated fully charged weapon systems and operational shield generators. Targeting computers identified 14 heavy plasma cannons per vessel, plus missile batteries and point defense arrays. Shield differential calculations appeared on the main display. The combined Krex defensive capability measured 23 times greater than the Defiant's maximum shield strength. Weapon power ratios showed similar disparities. The tactical computer flashed multiple warning indicators recommending immediate retreat. Captain Bennett ignored the alerts and leaned forward in his command chair. He ordered an immediate attack pattern rather than defensive maneuvers. The helmsman engaged thrusters at maximum acceleration toward the nearest dreadnought. Weapons officers targeted sensor arrays and communication dishes instead of attempting to damage shields. Their first volley of laser fire struck 3 different external systems on the lead Krex vessel. The ship used speed and unpredictability as its only advantages. Pilot Kelly Adams executed evasive patterns that ignored standard military protocols. She swung the Defiant in sharp, unpredictable arcs that made targeting difficult. The ship's inertial dampeners strained against the violent maneuvering. Crew members braced themselves against consoles as G-forces fluctuated wildly. Engineer Beth Clark monitored system damage from her station in main engineering. A plasma conduit ruptured along the port side, spraying superheated gas across the compartment. She bypassed 3 safety protocols manually and rerouted power through auxiliary systems. Her hands moved across the control panels without hesitation. She prioritized weapons and navigation over life support and non-essential systems. Medical officer Dr. Evans worked in a corridor that had become an emergency treatment area. Smoke from an electrical fire filled the space with acrid fumes. Emergency lighting cast flickering shadows across wounded crew members. He applied pressure to a bleeding wound while shouting instructions to medics. They used emergency sealant on hull breaches as they treated injuries. Each crew member performed tasks beyond their designated roles. Navigation officers assisted with damage control. Communications specialists helped secure loose equipment during violent maneuvers. Engineering technicians carried weapons to defend breach points. The ship functioned as a single organism responding to threat, not as separate departments following protocols. The Krex commanders observed this behavior with apparent confusion. Their tactical responses seemed delayed and methodical compared to the Defiant's aggressive movements. They maintained formation around the merchant vessel rather than focusing entirely on the attacking ship. Their weapon fire appeared calculated and precise, targeting systems rather than attempting immediate destruction. On the bridge of the lead dreadnought, War Leader Scarth watched the engagement unfold. His tactical officers reported the Earthship's impossible survival metrics. They noted multiple direct hits that should have disabled key systems. The vessel continued fighting despite catastrophic damage to its hull and internal systems. Scarth ordered more detailed analysis of the opponent's capabilities. The Krek's fighting style emphasized efficiency and minimal resource expenditure. They sought to disable opponents through systematic targeting of critical systems. The Defiant's aggressive, unpredictable attacks represented something outside their combat experience. Their tactical computers struggled to develop predictive models for the human ship's movements. The engagement continued with neither side gaining clear advantage. Mike Harrison led his 12-person team through the jagged opening in the Krek's dreadnought's hull. The breach had been created by a lucky hit from the Defiant's main battery. Twisted metal framed the entry point like broken teeth. Harrison went first, his plasma cutter glowing faintly in the dim emergency lighting. His team followed in single file, carrying improvised weapons and demolition charges. They moved with practiced silence through the opening. The Krek's internal security systems detected the breach within seconds. Automated defenses activated in the surrounding corridors. The aliens expected boarding drones or disciplined troops following standard boarding protocols. Their response teams took positions at choke points with energy weapons set to maximum stun. They prepared to contain and capture intruders using non-lethal measures first. Instead, they encountered humans who fought with brutal efficiency in close quarters. Harrison's team used the ship's architecture against its defenders. They shot out lighting systems to create darkness. They sealed emergency bulkheads to isolate Krek's responders. They used plasma cutters to open ventilation shafts and create new angles of attack. The Krek's found themselves fighting in their own corridors against opponents who refused to follow predictable patterns. Harrison's people used environmental systems as weapons. They overloaded power conduits to create electrical hazards. They vented atmospheric controls to suck Krek's warriors into vacuum. They triggered radiation leaks in non-essential compartments and herded defenders into the contaminated areas. The humans sealed their own protective suits and continued fighting while radiation alarms blared. The Krek's protective gear wasn't designed for sustained operations in hazardous environments. The alien warriors fell to attacks they couldn't anticipate. Humans dropped from overhead conduits instead of approaching through doorways. They used Krek's own emergency equipment against them, turning fire suppression systems into weapons that blocked corridors with freezing foam. They fought through injuries that should have disabled them, ignoring wounds that would have incapacitated most species. Their movements remained precise and aggressive despite blood loss and broken bones. The boarding party suffered heavy losses during their advance. 3 team members died sealing a corridor against Krek's reinforcements. 2 more fell when a defensive turret activated unexpectedly. Harrison took an energy blast to his left arm but continued leading the advance. His armor had partially absorbed the impact, but the limb hung useless at his side. He switched his plasma cutter to his right hand and kept moving forward. They reached the main engineering section after 27 minutes of combat. The remaining 6 team members secured the heavy doors with thermal charges. Inside, Krek's technicians tried to activate security protocols. Harrison's people disabled the control consoles with targeted weapons fire. They placed explosive charges on the main power distribution nodes. One technician set the timing for 30 seconds. The resulting explosion crippled the dreadnought's primary systems. Emergency power kicked in immediately, but couldn't compensate for the damage. Weapon systems lost 90% of their capacity. Shield generators faltered as power redirects failed. Environmental controls shut down across 12 decks. The ship's artificial gravity flickered off, then stabilized at 30% normal strength. On the bridge of the lead Krek's vessel, War Leader Scarth received the damage reports. His tactical display showed the engineering section of his sister ship going dark. System failures cascaded through the vessel's networks. He watched in disbelief as the dreadnought's combat effectiveness dropped to emergency levels. His officers reported the boarding party was still active, despite multiple containment efforts. Scarth ordered additional security teams to engineering, but knew they would arrive too late. The humans had achieved what should have been impossible against a ship of that size. War Leader Scarth watched the tactical display with growing unease. His first officer reported continued resistance from the boarding party, despite multiple containment efforts. The humans had damaged engineering systems that should have been impossible to reach. Scarth ordered his tactical AI to analyze the combat patterns of the attackers. The system began processing sensor data and visual recordings from the engagement. The analysis revealed physiological anomalies in the human fighters. Their endurance metrics exceeded known species parameters by significant margins. The system noted continued combat effectiveness despite injury levels that would incapacitate most life forms. Thermal scans showed elevated metabolic rates persisting through blood loss and trauma. Neurological readings indicated pain suppression mechanisms operating far beyond standard biological limits. Scarth requested planetary classification data for the human's homeworld. His console accessed the galactic database through secure military channels. The system processed the request for 12 seconds before returning the classification report. Earth received a Class 12 Deathworld designation. Scarth had never encountered a classification above Class 7 in his military career. The readouts showed atmospheric composition that would be toxic to most species. Oxygen levels measured significantly higher than galactic averages. The air contained multiple reactive elements that damaged respiratory systems. Pollen counts and microbial loads registered at hazardous concentrations. Seasonal variations created additional atmospheric instability across the planet. Planetary gravity measurements showed 9.8 meters per second squared. The database noted this was 30% higher than the galactic average for inhabited worlds. Tectonic activity levels registered as extreme with frequent seismic events. Volcanic activity occurred across multiple continental plates. Weather systems generated wind speeds that would tear apart most structures. The database listed Earth's predator species with accompanying threat assessments. It noted numerous life forms that hunted for sport rather than sustenance. Several species employed complex pack hunting strategies. Others utilized venom or anatomical weapons that could penetrate advanced armor. The planet's evolutionary history showed continuous arms races between predators and prey. The system highlighted human evolutionary background as persistence hunters. Their physiological adaptations allowed sustained pursuit over extreme distances. Cooling mechanisms prevented overheating during prolonged exertion. Energy storage capabilities enabled multi-day pursuit of prey. Cognitive functions supported complex tracking and prediction of target behavior. Scarth reviewed the medical reports from the boarding action. Humans continued fighting with broken bones and severe blood loss. Their bodies released natural analgesics that suppressed pain responses. Muscle tissue contained unique fast-twitch fibers that functioned despite damage. Circulatory systems could bypass damaged vessels through collateral flow. He understood now why his warriors were failing against these opponents. The humans operated on entirely different biological parameters. Their concept of injury thresholds didn't match standard galactic physiology. What would disable another species merely slowed them down. Their fighting style reflected their evolutionary background as relentless pursuers. The war leader looked at the tactical display with new understanding. He wasn't facing soldiers who followed conventional military doctrine. He was facing organisms shaped by a world that killed the weak without mercy. Every second of their evolutionary history had prepared them for survival against impossible odds. Their planet had tested them with constant threats that would exterminate other species. Scarth realized the fundamental error in their engagement strategy. They had approached this as a military confrontation against comparable opponents. The humans were something else entirely. Their capabilities weren't technological advantages, but biological realities. Their ship wasn't their greatest weapon. Their very biology was the threat. He watched the Defiant continue its attack despite catastrophic damage. The ship moved with the same relentless energy as its crew. Its maneuvers reflected the persistence hunting tactics of its species. It kept coming despite systems failures that should have ended the engagement. The Krex commanders had never encountered an enemy that fought like this before. The revelation changed everything about how Scarth viewed the conflict. He began issuing new orders to his fleet. The tactical approach needed complete revision. Standard engagement protocols wouldn't work against these opponents. They required strategies designed for predators, not soldiers. Sensor signatures from the battle spread across civilian communication channels. Merchant vessels and transport ships monitoring emergency frequencies detected the energy spikes. Long-range scanners picked up the distinctive patterns of Krex weapon discharges mixed with unfamiliar defensive fire. The data streams showed one small ship engaging 3 capital-class warships. Civilian operators began sharing the feeds across open networks. Merchant captains watched the unfolding battle on their navigation displays. They saw the Defiant's lone stand against overwhelming force. The ship executed maneuvers that defied standard combat protocols. It attacked instead of retreating. It targeted systems rather than attempting to disengage. The civilian observers recognized the mathematical impossibility of the situation. They understood what the great powers had refused to acknowledge. Captain Nex of the merchant vessel. Steady Prophet altered course without consulting his crew. He set coordinates for the battle zone despite the clear danger. His ship carried no weapons and minimal shielding. It was designed for cargo transport, not combat operations. He informed his crew they were responding to a distress signal that military vessels had ignored. His first officer began plotting an intercept course. The mining vessel Rockrear detected the Steady Prophet's course change. Its captain reviewed the battle data and reached the same conclusion. The heavy mining ship turned toward the conflict without awaiting instructions. Its powerful engines accelerated it toward the engagement zone. The ship's reinforced hull could withstand moderate weapon impacts. Its crew prepared to use mining lasers for defensive purposes. Dozens of civilian ships began converging from different vectors. Freighters, survey vessels, and passenger transports altered their planned routes. They came from trade lanes and mining operations across 3 sectors. None carried significant weaponry. Their captains coordinated through open channels, sharing positions and velocities. They formed an improvised fleet with no central command structure. The civilian ships created sensor confusion as they entered weapons range. Their varied sizes and energy signatures overwhelmed Krek's targeting systems. The warship's computers tried to classify each new contact while maintaining combat operations. Priority queues filled with non-combatant vessels. Targeting solutions became unreliable as the number of contacts multiplied. The civilian vessels used their physical presence as barriers. They positioned themselves between the Defiant and Krek's weapons. Freighters with reinforced hulls took positions where plasma fire would likely travel. Mining ships used their bulk to block missile trajectories. The Krek's targeting systems couldn't acquire clear shots without risking civilian casualties. Their fire patterns became hesitant and uncertain. Civilian engineers monitored the Defiant's damage reports through leaked sensor data. They began broadcasting repair advice on emergency frequencies. Technical specialists suggested bypass procedures for damaged systems. Power management experts offered rerouting solutions for failing networks. The collective knowledge of dozens of engineering teams flowed toward the wounded warship. Defiant's crew implemented the most viable suggestions. The mathematical certainty of the battle shifted with each new civilian arrival. Krek's tactical advantages diminished as targeting solutions failed. Their weapon efficiency dropped by 40%. The Defiant gained temporary respites from concentrated fire. Damage control teams used these moments to seal breaches and restore systems. The balance of the engagement tilted away from predetermined outcomes. What began as a military confrontation transformed into something else entirely. Merchant captains and miners became active participants in the conflict. Their intervention represented a rejection of the great powers' calculations. They demonstrated that some values transcended risk assessment. The battle became a moral uprising against accepted galactic norms. Civilian vessels continued arriving from all directions, adding their mass to the growing formation. War leader Scarth studied the tactical display with cold precision. The civilian ships had created an unpredictable tactical environment. Their random movements and varied signatures disrupted targeting solutions. His warships could no longer achieve clear firing lines against the Defiant. The mathematical advantage had shifted away from his fleet. Scarth recognized the engagement had entered an unacceptable phase. He issued new orders to his remaining vessels. All weapon systems would target the Harmony's light. The merchant vessel represented the simplest solution to the tactical problem. Destroying it would eliminate the reason for the Defiant's resistance. The civilian ships would lose their purpose for intervening. The Kreks could then withdraw with minimal additional losses. The final volley required coordinated fire from all operational weapons. 3 torpedo bays activated across the Kreks formation. Damage to 1 dreadnought limited its contribution to 2 launchers. Targeting computers calculated trajectories that avoided civilian vessel positions. The solution showed 94% probability of target destruction. The merchant ship had no functional defenses remaining. Targeting lasers painted the Harmony's light's hull. Red beams connected the warships to their intended victim. The civilian ships detected the targeting locks immediately. Merchant vessels attempted to position themselves between the Kreks and their target. Mining ships used their bulk to block firing lines. The formations created temporary obstacles but couldn't stop all weapons. The Defiant's weapons officer scanned the developing threat. His console showed insufficient power for intercept missions. Main batteries operated at 12% capacity. Point defense systems had limited ammunition remaining. Shield generators couldn't extend protection to the merchant vessel. He reported the tactical reality to Captain Bennett without embellishment. Bennett faced the immediate choice between two outcomes. He could order a final attack against the lead dreadnought. This might disable the torpedo launch capability. It would also leave the Harmony's light exposed to the other ships. Alternatively, he could attempt to protect the civilians directly. This would require sacrificing defensive positioning and likely destroy his ship. The bridge crew watched their captain process the decision. They understood the stakes involved. Protecting the civilians meant accepting almost certain destruction. Attacking the Kreks offered a chance of military victory, but guaranteed civilian deaths. The choice represented different definitions of success. One prioritized lives, the other prioritized winning the engagement. Every crew member recognized this moment would define their service. They had volunteered for a rescue mission knowing the risks. Their actions had already exceeded standard military parameters. Now they faced the ultimate test of their stated values. Would they sacrifice themselves for strangers, or would they choose survival over principles? The silence on the bridge felt heavier than vacuum. Systems alarms provided background noise to the tension. Damage reports flashed across secondary displays. The Krek's torpedo bays reached full readiness. Targeting locks remained steady despite civilian interference. The countdown to launch proceeded automatically. Bennett's face showed no visible emotion as he considered the options. His hands rested lightly on the command console. He watched the main display showing the vulnerable merchant vessel. 200 civilians waited inside that ship. They had placed their trust in the Defiant's arrival. They represented the reason for this entire engagement. The captain's decision would reverberate beyond this battle. It would send a message to the entire galaxy about human values. It would define how other species viewed Earth's presence in space. The great powers had already demonstrated their calculations. Now humanity would show theirs. The moment stretched as weapons systems reached final readiness stages. Captain Bennett calculated the ramming maneuver in under 3 seconds. His console displayed the trajectory that would send the Defiant into the lead dreadnought's engine core. The impact would breach the antimatter containment systems. The resulting explosion would destroy both ships completely. His own vessel would cease to exist in that moment. The mathematics showed a 97% probability of target destruction. The human cost appeared on his secondary screen automatically. Life support systems would fail immediately upon impact. Most crew members would perish in the collision. Those in reinforced sections might survive the initial explosion, but would suffocate afterward. Escape pods couldn't deploy during an acceleration maneuver. The sacrifice would save the civilians but doom his own people. Bennett looked at the main view screen showing the civilian ships. They had formed protective layers around the Harmony's light. Merchant vessels positioned themselves between the Kreks and their target. Mining ships used their bulk as physical barriers. These weren't military craft performing tactical maneuvers. They were ordinary ships making extraordinary choices. Their captains had chosen to protect strangers. His voice remained completely calm when he spoke. He countermanded the attack order before the helmsman could input coordinates. The bridge crew heard the change in command tone. They recognized the significance of his decision. Bennett then issued new instructions for power allocation. He directed all remaining energy to point defense, systems, and forward shields. The Defiant moved into position between the Krek's warships and the Harmony's light. Its engines fired at maximum thrust to achieve the blocking position. The ship rotated to present its strongest shield facing the threat. Weapon systems recalibrated to intercept incoming torpedoes rather than attack the dreadnoughts. The tactical computer showed the new configuration couldn't survive sustained fire. Krek's weapons impacted the Defiant's forward shields immediately. The first volley drained 60% of shield capacity. Emergency systems rerouted power from non-essential functions. Life support dropped to minimum levels across all decks. Environmental controls shut down in sections not containing crew members. The ship prioritized defense over comfort or safety. Shield generators failed under the continuous assault. The forward barrier collapsed with an energy discharge that damaged external sensors. Subsequent weapons fire struck the hull directly. Plasma bursts vaporized armor plating along the starboard side. Laser arrays cut through metal support structures. The ship shuddered from multiple impacts. Hull breaches opened across 5 different decks. Emergency doors sealed automatically to contain atmosphere loss. Crew members in affected sections donned survival gear. Some compartments vented completely into space. Damage control teams worked to reinforce bulkheads against further breaches. The ship's structural integrity dropped to critical levels. The Harmony's light remained untouched behind the defensive position. Krek's torpedoes that bypassed the point defense system struck the Defiant instead. The merchant vessel registered no new damage during the entire exchange. Its emergency systems continued stabilizing life support. Civilian ships maintained their protective formation around it. This act of sacrifice changed the fundamental dynamics of the battle. The Kreks had expected retaliation or retreat. They had prepared for aggressive countermeasures or desperate maneuvers. Instead, they witnessed complete self-sacrifice for unprotected strangers. Their tactical computers couldn't process this behavior pattern. Their weapons continued firing, but their strategic approach faltered. War Leader Scarth watched the Defiant take punishment that should have destroyed any warship. He saw the civilian vessels holding formation around their protected charge. The entire engagement had transformed from military conflict into something else. His own calculations seemed suddenly inadequate against this different kind of logic. The battle had reached its turning point through an act of restraint rather than aggression. War Leader Scarth watched the main display on his bridge. The Defiant continued to absorb punishment that should have destroyed any warship. Its hull showed multiple breaches and system failures. Emergency power kept the vessel operational despite catastrophic damage. The tactical computer repeatedly indicated the ship should have ceased functioning minutes earlier. Yet it maintained position between his fleet and the civilian vessels. He observed the civilian ships swarming around the wounded warship. Merchant vessels and mining craft formed protective layers around both the Defiant and the Harmony's light. Their movements lacked military precision, but demonstrated clear intent. These were non-combatant ships risking destruction to protect strangers. Their formation created a physical barrier that complicated targeting solutions. Scarth had commanded Krek's forces for 30 standard years. He had conquered 14 star systems and destroyed numerous fleets. His tactics had overcome advanced warships and fortified positions. He had faced enemies who fought with desperation or calculated precision. None had presented the combination of sacrifice and restraint he witnessed now. The humans sacrificed their own safety without demanding reciprocal protection. They restrained their attacks to protect civilians rather than seeking military victory. Their actions defied standard combat psychology. Most species fought for territory, resources, or survival. These humans fought for principles that transcended immediate gains. Scarth opened a direct channel to Captain Bennett's ship. The communication system established a secure link between the two vessels. He spoke in clear, measured tones without diplomatic formalities. His surrender message contained specific terms that guaranteed civilian protection. He offered safe passage for all non-combatants and medical assistance for the wounded. The Krek's war leader acknowledged he had never faced an enemy like humans before. He stated their combat style reflected values unlike any he had encountered. They fought not for conquest or material gain but for the protection of strangers. Their willingness to sacrifice themselves for others represented a new paradigm in interstellar conflict. Scarth ordered all Krek's weapon systems to power down. The command transferred across the 3 dreadnoughts simultaneously. Plasma cannons retracted into their housings. Torpedo bays sealed their launch doors. Targeting systems disengaged from all contacts. Energy readings dropped to standby levels across the warships. The sudden silence felt more shocking than the battle's violence had been. Weapon fire ceased between the opposing forces. Engine noises became the primary sound across the engagement zone. The civilian ships maintained their positions but stopped their evasive maneuvers. The Defiant held its defensive posture despite the changed circumstances. On the bridge of the lead dreadnought, Scarth watched the tactical display update. His officers confirmed the weapons shut down across the fleet. Damage control teams began assessing their own vessel's status. The war leader remained at his command station, observing the strange calm that had settled over the battlefield. The Krek's surrender included provisions for prisoner exchange and medical aid. Scarth guaranteed the safety of all human personnel during the disengagement process. He offered assistance in repairing the Defiant's critical systems. His terms demonstrated respect for his opponents rather than mere military necessity. The civilian ships slowly adjusted their formation to allow access to the damaged vessels. Merchant captains coordinated with both sides to establish communication protocols. Mining vessels offered their engineering resources for emergency repairs. The battle zone transformed from a combat area to a rescue operation. Scarth maintained his position on the bridge, watching the unprecedented scene unfold. His tactical officers seemed uncertain how to process the situation. Standard procedures didn't cover surrender to an opponent you had technically outperformed. The mathematics of the engagement favored the Kreks, yet the humans had achieved their objective. The war leader considered the implications of this encounter. His entire understanding of conflict required reassessment. The humans had demonstrated that some victories couldn't be measured by ships destroyed or territory gained. They had redefined what constituted success in military engagement. Their approach challenged fundamental assumptions about interstellar relations. The silence stretched across space, broken only by emergency broadcasts and rescue coordination. The Kreks vessels held their positions without aggressive posturing. The human ship maintained its watchful stance despite its damaged condition. Civilian craft moved between the former adversaries, facilitating the unusual peace. Medical teams from the Defiant boarded the Harmony's light through emergency airlocks. They moved through darkened corridors with portable lights and medical kits. The merchant ship's atmosphere registered thin but breathable. Emergency power maintained basic life support throughout the vessel. They found civilians huddled in reinforced compartments, many suffering from oxygen deprivation and shock. All 200 passengers and crew were alive. The survivors displayed varying degrees of trauma. Some sat in silent catatonia while others wept uncontrollably. Medical personnel administered sedatives and oxygen to those in critical condition. Triage teams prioritized injuries based on severity rather than species or status. They worked quickly but methodically through the damaged vessel. The evacuation proceeded without panic or resistance. The Defiant's crew suffered 4 confirmed fatalities during the engagement. 18 additional crew members sustained serious injuries requiring immediate treatment. Engineering reported 3 more in critical condition from radiation exposure during the boarding action. Medical bays on board both ships operated at maximum capacity. The wounded filled every available treatment space. Engineering teams surveyed the Defiant's damage with grim expressions. The ship had taken multiple direct hits to essential systems. Warp drive components showed critical failure indicators. Hull integrity measured below safe jump thresholds. The chief engineer reported the vessel might not survive another faster-than-light transition. Emergency repairs could stabilize life support, but not restore travel capability. Civilian vessels offered immediate assistance without being asked. Merchant ships transferred medical supplies through cargo airlocks. Mining vessels provided raw materials for hull patches. Engineering teams from multiple ships coordinated repair efforts through shared channels. The collective response created an impromptu space dock around the damaged warship. Repair drones swarmed over the Defiant's hull like mechanical insects. The Kreks prisoners were secured according to their own terms of surrender. They occupied designated areas aboard their damaged dreadnoughts. Their weapons remained powered down under mutual observation. Human security teams monitored their movements without direct confrontation. The arrangement represented an unusual armistice without precedent in Kreks military history. Captain Bennett coordinated the complex aftermath from his damaged bridge. He dispatched repair teams to assist the Harmony's light. He authorized medical aid for wounded Kreks personnel. He arranged temporary command structures with civilian vessel captains. His voice remained calm and measured through hours of coordination. The bridge crew followed his directions with quiet efficiency. Galactic news channels began requesting interviews within hours of the ceasefire. Their signals bounced off communication buoys across nearby systems. Journalists sought comments from all participants in the engagement. They particularly wanted statements from Captain Bennett and War Leader Scarth. The Defiant's communications officer screened the increasing number of requests. The story spread through FTL communication networks faster than official reports could travel. Merchant captains shared their sensor recordings with news organizations. Civilian witnesses provided first-hand accounts of the battle. The narrative focused on human intervention where others had refused to act. Details emerged about the Defiant's damaged condition and crew casualties. Other governments began questioning their own decisions not to intervene. Military analysts reviewed the engagement data with renewed interest. Political leaders faced criticism for their risk-averse calculations. Some administrations launched internal investigations into their response protocols. The Krek's surrender to a significantly outgunned opponent raised particular questions. The galactic community confronted an uncomfortable reality about human capabilities and values. Their willingness to sacrifice for strangers challenged established diplomatic norms. Their combat effectiveness against superior forces demanded revised threat assessments. Their cooperation with civilian vessels demonstrated unexpected flexibility. The aftermath of the battle revealed more about interstellar relations than the conflict itself.